Financial literacy mandates in every state fail to meet even the minimum education standards. When I say education standards, I'm talking about the minimum standards required by core subjects like your math, English, science, etc. There are certain standards they must live up to and certain conditions that they must meet in order to be taught. But for some reason, financial literacy is treated completely different. They don't meet these minimum standards, and it's shocking they would even allow this low level of programming to be mandated in every state. Every state that requires it, about half the states do right now. They don't even meet these minimum education standards. In this video, I'm going to cover just 12 basic education standards that should be met by every single topic that's taught, but again, that aren't taught this way when it comes to financial literacy. Number one being standalone class. If we look at math, science, English, it's all taught in a standalone class. You go to math class, you go to English class, you go to foreign language class. But for some reason, they think with personal finance, it does not need to be taught in a standalone class. It can be integrated with other coursework. Now, there's some states that do require a short standalone class. The biggest one I've seen is one semester, but most is integrated into the coursework of math or economics. And there's big problems with that. I see it out here in Texas. I'm out in Texas, and in Texas, financial literacy is an elective. You can either take one semester of economics or one semester of economics and financial literacy. Now, it's supposed to be two-thirds financial literacy and one-third economics if they chose that option. But since the teachers are from the economic side, they already have the lesson plans. They feel comfortable teaching economics, and they have a structure for that class. Oftentimes, financial literacy gets really pushed out. The students I talk to, and I go to a gym where I talk to these kids every day, and what they're saying is they don't have really much financial literacy training in that class, the ones that select that option. So they're maybe getting a quarter to a third when they should be getting two-thirds of the time to comply with the state standards. Plus, any subject that they want to teach, it's always a standalone subject. Again, financial literacy is treated differently. Next, no state even comes close to assigning enough time and rigor to the subject matter. The Again, about half the states require it. Most kids will never get a financial education. Those that are in states that mandate financial literacy, they'll get less than 25 hours. The ones that require most, it's about one semester, 50, 60 hours. But that's not enough time to teach a subject as complicated as personal finance. Try speaking a foreign language after 25 hours. Try learning anything after that amount of time, especially when something as complicated and there's so many facets as financial literacy. Now, a lot of these school administrators are hampered because the politicians will list a bunch of random topics that they're required to teach. For example, in Ohio, the legislation lists out 70 topics that they must teach. And in Ohio, there's about 50 teachable hours. It says one semester, which is 60 hours, but after administration time in others, it's about 50 teachable hours. So trying to cover 70 topics in 50 teachable hours, it can't be done effectively. And you can cover that, but you're focused on very low order thinking skill sets. So for those teachers and educators familiar with Bloom's taxonomy of higher order thinking skill sets and Webb's depth of knowledge, you understand if you're teaching a lot of subjects, you have to focus on very low levels of learning, which do very little to benefit anybody in the long run. When you focus on low levels of learning like recall and reproduction, somebody may be able to pass a quiz, but they're going to forget about it quick. Learning loss is very steep, and it will not make a real difference in their lives. Even when you read the standards, I just reviewed New York's financial literacy standards. It says most of the standards identify, define, explain. Those are all low order thinking skill sets. Again, people can pass a quiz, but it will make no difference in their lives. Higher order thinking skill sets are things like creating a plan, analysis, being able to analyze your current financial situation, your budget, application, being able to apply what you learn into a real area of your life that you need support in. So, again, they're focused on low order thinking skill sets, which will do little or nothing for them. There's not enough time and not enough rigor. So most classes, personal finance classes, will offer no benefits to students, where you have all other subjects, science, math, English, social studies. So students have gone through all their elementary school, all their high school, and if they go off to college, they're getting more education there. But again, financial literacy, they treat differently. Oh, 20 hours is fine. Good luck. A lot of people just want to say they have a program as opposed to having a program that delivers real value. Lastly, there's a lack of ongoing education. So there's not follow up. So it's hard to instill positive financial behaviors. Remember, with money, it's different than learning a subject. They can apply it, and it's going to benefit them. And there's behaviors and habits that are all a part of this. And without ongoing education, it can be lost. Now, with all other subjects, there's some form of ongoing education. As I said before, people are going through that different subject training, English, math, science, through their whole education career and into college. But with personal finance, it's one and done, and there's no follow up. And there's a huge opportunity for follow up because we have their contact information. We can stay in communication. We know their exact life stage, if they're planning on going to college or not. So we can provide very targeted, ongoing education in a very cost effective way, yet they fail to do that. So, as far as program structure, it's not in a standalone class in most cases. And no state requires enough time and rigor, and there's no ongoing education that I've seen required by any state. So, major failures in program structure. As far as the lesson plans, again, we're seeing more problems. First, the one thing that is lacking in all states is relevant content that prepares students for near-term life events. We see a random list of topics being taught to students, and it's not a focused agenda on helping them tackle the problems we know they have. When students move out, first, they're inundated with credit cards when they turn 18. Many get into credit card debt. Many make early credit mistakes. Many get into college, choose colleges that are not what they should be doing, that don't deliver ROI. Many don't move out on their own because they don't know how to. So we know the mistakes that youth are making, and we can proactively prepare them for those financial challenges. Instead, most states offer a random list of topics. For instance, Florida has random lists, credit, debt, etc. Then they'll say what to do with inheritance money, right? Who does that benefit? It's a very small amount of people. And why is that in there rather than how to move out on your own and be self sufficient? In Massachusetts, the bill 4199, very scary bill. They mandate the teachers teach cryptocurrency. First, they have a huge list of topics and to be delivered in a very short period of time. And they mandate cryptocurrency being taught and online stock trading, right? And that's a very dangerous thing. The scary thing is they don't even talk about debt or require debt to be taught. A major failure of a bill. And we see that problem real systematic across this country with other bills. I see a lot of bills, they copy the language and the topics being required. But if they teach relevant topics, if we do a basic education principle, which is called backwards design, we understand the major challenges they're facing and select the topics and lessons that will best help them avoid those challenges. But they fail to do that. Another issue is with all other subjects, there's curriculum that's evidence based and tested. They purchase curriculum. You don't get free online resources for math and in science. No, there's curriculum and lesson plans and workbooks and everything like that, textbooks that are required because they've been vetted. With financial education, it's not like that. Most states will say utilize free online resources. Some states list a bunch of resources, and that's problematic. First, it's not the best material. Oftentimes, there's conflicts of interest. They might bring in a financial service institution material. I saw Visa football recommended by some states, or even government organizations which have some inherent bias to what they're teaching. It should be independent curriculum, vetted and evidence based, and they should be paying for that in researching it. Again, I don't know why all other topics they're using curriculum and purchasing student guides and textbooks, but with financial education, just go find some free stuff you find online. Very sad. California also has this weird condition that it must be made in California. Very strange. Again, some rules I just don't get. Instead of just California, why can't it be the best material that's going to produce the greatest student gains? That would make a lot more sense to me if they were looking out for student well-being. Finally, customized lesson plans based on student needs is completely absent from personal finance. There's typically one class given late in a high school kid's career, and that's it. With all other subjects, we have remedial math, we have standard math, we have college prep math, and we have the more advanced where they're taking, those more advanced mathematics. So we have multiple levels based on student learning and capabilities. And with personal finance, I would argue we need to make these levels based on their socioeconomic status. Now, when I started in this industry, I started in Orange County, California. That's where I grew up. And I was 2006. I was volunteering, doing a lot of work. And on one side of Warner Avenue, it was the Santa Ana School District, very poor, very impoverished. They're sharing books, metal detectors, a lot of problems there, right? And when I taught those kids, very low socioeconomic status, they had a much better handle on budgeting. They had a much better handle on delayed gratification because they lived that every day, but they did not have much hope for the future. On the other side of Warner Avenue was Orange County. Edison High School was right down the road, and they spent $4 or $6 million on a new track and field back when I was teaching back then. And they had very high socioeconomic students, and they had a lot of hope for the future. They didn't really know much about budgeting, and they knew very little about delayed gratification. So that's just one example that highlights the nuances of socioeconomic status and how we must adapt curriculum and lesson plans to meet their needs. And yet, I have not seen that in any state. Well, I did see it in one, but it was for special needs students, which I get. It should be given. But I have never seen it based on socioeconomic status, which is a major failure, right? So, in terms of lesson plans, again, not relevant content, doesn't prepare them for near-term life events. They don't adopt proven curriculum. Most of it's just free stuff they find online from financial services and government organizations. And there's no customized lesson plans. So major failure across all those conditions for lesson plans. Now, a lot can be made up with quality educators and leadership, right? So they can have all those. So I talked about program structure, major failure. I talked about lesson plans, major failure. But a lot can be made up if we have high quality educators. So I can give a high quality teacher that knows personal finance, that's qualified to teach it. They know the behavioral finance principles. They know how to adapt education methodologies to meet the unique needs of teaching a subject that's so entwined with people's behaviors or sentiment. And I can give that teacher the worst material in the world. They're going to make that class great. The kids are going to have great outcomes, but vice versa, I can't. If I give a low performing teacher in personal finance the best curriculum, I'm not going to get good outcomes. And the crazy thing is, no state offers educator training at a level that will make any difference. So I think one state, Utah, they have a content knowledge where they have to understand content knowledge, but content knowledge does little in 10, 12-hour class. It's not going to benefit them. Remember, to teach any other class, these teachers has gone through elementary, high school, college, and have been teaching that subject matter. And they think, oh, I could just throw in a 10-hour class. They're going to be efficient in teaching. Absolutely not. A major problem there. And every research that I've seen, the quality of student outcomes is determined by the quality of the instructor. That's the primary impactor. That's the primary thing that causes positive outcomes is the quality of the instructor. You have a high qualified instructor, you have a better chance at quality outcomes. You have a low qualified instructor, a much bigger chance of low outcomes. So all the research points to this, yet every state fails to prove any educator training that produces high quality educators. They need to understand various techniques. And just to illustrate my point, we develop only standards for financial education instructors. We didn't just make it up. We partnered with Charlotte Danielson. And for those not familiar, she wrote the framework for teaching, the most widely used teacher framework across this country for, I think it was K through 12 teachers. And we went to her, we said, hey, we love your framework, but it doesn't fit for personal finance because every kid has habits started by 7 to 9 they formed, already have adopted behaviors. They already have a sentiment and a feeling and a relationship with money. They've already developed spending habits. They already have all these outside influencers that are influencing their decisions in consumerism, all these other factors. And she agreed. And so we partnered with her to write the only standards for financial educators that gives them clear guidelines on the competencies that they need. And yet all states fail to do that. Why? It costs them money, right? It costs them time. But again, this just highlights for all other subjects, you need to go through years and years and years of training. But for personal finance, most states require zero training for the educators. They'll tap coaches, math instructors, economics teachers that have no knowledge of this, or they'll provide very little training on content that does nothing to how we teach and how we move students to take action. So, major failure. Next is programs designed by qualified leaders in the space. Absolutely not. I've only met two states. One gentleman, he was not even the head of the state. He's the head of a city, but everybody turns to him. And I like him because he actually has many years of teaching personal finance. He shows true care for the students, and he's been boots on the ground, right? He's gone through outside trainings and so forth. So he's highly committed. All other states that I've reviewed, they don't have people that have conducted personal finance programs. How do you have somebody leading a personal finance initiative from a school administration standpoint that hasn't given thousands of hours of personal finance instruction? You can't. It's like, would you ever see a math head of the math department that had no years of teaching math, a head of a science department with no years teaching science? Absolutely not. But again, for personal finance, that doesn't matter. We'll throw in Gary over there in accounting and he'll figure it out. No, it doesn't work that way. And it's such a unique subject with such major consequences, and they treat it like a secondhand, not important, not worthy of the time. Next, in the educator and leadership, the outcomes, right? These are key. Learner outcomes, focus, and assess. Many states don't even require any tests. Those that do, it's just a content knowledge test. So, can they identify what APR means? Can they identify a good credit score? Basic level recall reproduction, no real benefit. And with personal finance, we need to measure different things. Content knowledge is a small piece of doing this. There's so many people out there that know how to have good credit, that know how to have balance their budget, but they don't do it. Why? Because there's habits, behaviors, confidence, sentiment, relationships with money, outside influence, all those things I mentioned before that we can measure. And also we can measure actual outcomes. Are they setting up their bank accounts? Do they have a calendar system in place to remind them of when to gather their tax documentation? Have they built have they found a person to do their taxes? We can measure those as well. That gives us clear outcomes that are better indicators of future success. Knowledge of personal finance does nothing. It does very little for somebody. Having systems, processes, team members, procedures, behaviors, and system setup, that's what produces people that are more likely to achieve financial wellness. Well documented, and it's ridiculous that they don't follow the science of education, right? And it's very clear. So educators and leadership, a major failure across the board. They do not even meet the minimum education standards required by any other topic, which is very sad. And lastly, programming support, right? So you need some funding, right, to do any type of financial literacy. Well, shocker, most programs are unfunded mandates, which means politicians say you need to teach personal finance. Here's a list of some random topics, and you get no money, right? So the schools have no money to do that. So they have to pull from other departments. Other departments don't want funding pulled from them. So the fight, oftentimes you see such low quality programs because there is no funding. And that's just a minimal. All other subjects get massive amounts of funding. You know how much we spend? Almost $1 trillion a year in funding schools. It's a huge amount of money, especially for the failure of outcomes they're producing. It's really sad right now. It's very upsetting, but especially with personal finance. They're not funding that. And I think that can have a huge difference in people's lives. They don't start lessons early in elementary school. That's another major failure, right? So the support doesn't come. So it's high school, you're going to get 25 hours and be done. You're going to forget it in time. Elementary school is key because we can mold and modify their behaviors over time. We can start to introduce them to basic concepts early. They can start to develop habits and systems. And now when we get to high school, we go to prepping them for the near-term life events, just like any other subject. English in first grade, you're writing, your capital letters, your small letters, second grade, you're doing little sentences. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but there's a growth, there's a progression, there's systems to develop skill sets in that. It's proven, right? That's how we have to handle teaching. It worked for all other subjects, but again, nope. Financial literacy, here's 25 hours, learn it all, and you'll be good. Absolutely not. And lastly, these school mandates fail to encourage parental involvement. They don't give anything for parents. I have not seen a state yet, and let me know if you guys see anything else that gives materials and access to resources to parents. And parents still have the primary responsibility of teaching their kids about money because schools are absolutely failing. But schools should be encouraging parents to teach them about that. And there's many ways parents can be involved. And it's just really a shame because they're the ones that need to be, helping to mold positive behaviors. There's some limits to what schools could do, especially just with the time components, time constraints, but we can engage the parents in a meaningful way. So if we look at all in with other subjects, right? Parents are there doing homework with their kids, they're doing those activities with their kids because they have to, right? But financial literacy, no. So if we look at all those, from program structure, lesson plans, educators and leadership, program support, every state mandate fails to meet even the minimum education standards of those 12 areas I outlined. They don't meet any of the standards to meet the minimum education standards of other topics. And I would argue financial literacy, once you get to high school and above, it's more important than every topic they are teaching there currently. With most kids, when if they're on pace, right? If they're at eighth grade reading level, eighth grade literacy level, and eighth grade mathematic level, they're going to have most of the knowledge they need for the real world. Less than 10% of people ever use advanced math in their job. Less than 5% of people ever need any science, biology, chemistry. Most people are reading at an eighth grade level already. Maybe the first 2 years of English are good, as far as research and composition. The last two are a waste. Literature, nobody uses that. A foreign language, if you're not a native speaker, you don't need it. So they're choosing to include classes that benefit a small percent, less than 10% of people, and they're treating that like such important subjects, and instead they're ignoring the subject that benefits 100% of people. 100% of people would benefit from financial literacy. They're failing to teach it. When they do teach it, they fail to meet even the minimum education standards of other topics. We need to change. We need to elevate these standards, and it's really embarrassing for these states that are mandating financial literacy with such low rigor, no alignment with any research-based education methodologies or standards or outcome focus, and it's really wasting people's time. Let's elevate the standards. Let's drive it so our kids can graduate being self-sufficient and contributing members of society.